Welcome everyone to this session of Infotouch University Online, where we go in depth into various topics of our point-of-sale programs, Store Manager and Store Keeper POS. Today's subject is the reports in the inventory module, and there is no difference between the two products with regards to these reports. So we'll talk here on out about our POS software. The inventory module has the most reports of any module in the system. There are actually 46 different reports, and each of them has many different ways to run it. So there's a tremendous amount of information at your fingertips using the inventory module reports. There are two ways to access these reports. You can hit this report button right here on the main menu of the inventory module, or you can use the Windows menu to directly get at a list of reports. The first several of these we'll refer to as basic reports, and then you see different reports broken down into categories like analysis, special features, audit reports, labels, vendors, and replenishment. So quite a long list, and we will not be able to cover the whole thing today, hence this is actually Inventory Reports Part 1. And today we will cover the basic reports, the analysis reports, and the special features. So let's go ahead and click on one of these, and you'll notice it's really the same thing as going into the Reports button and then selecting one of the reports from this scrollable list of reports that we have. Okay, so let's start off with the first report, which is our item list. And what we're about to go over in terms of selection and options and filtering is going to be applicable to a whole large number of these reports. In fact, all the ones we covered today. The only ones that are exceptions are the vendor and replenishment reports, which have different selection criteria. So you're always going to see at least two tabs once you select a report, the first of which is telling us what items you want to report on, and there are a lot of different ways to select those items. We default to coming in by item number and leaving the from and to item numbers fields blank. In general, with any of our reports, including these and across other modules as well, when you get a range to select, if you leave the from side of the range blank, that means start at the beginning. If you leave the to side of the range blank, that means go to the end. Therefore, by leaving from and to blank, and because every item must have an item number, we are basically saying to report on all inventory. We could also select a range of UPCs. Now, bear in mind, you may not report on all items with this, since the UPC field is optional, and if you select from to UPC, any item that does not have a UPC will be skipped. We can select a range of departments or department groups if you have those set up, for example, services versus products, perhaps in a salon. We are here, by the way, in a gift store vertical that I use for many of these demonstrations just because it's been around for a long time and has a lot of different things already set up. The most common choice outside of by item number is to select a specific department. And once you do that, you actually then get ranges within the department to report on. So in this case, the apparel department here is broken down by indices of type, description, and size. And by leaving the froms and to blank, we again are going to report on all items, in this case in the apparel department. Or we can type in something into these from and to fields in order to limit the reports. For example, if I only wanted to report on large size items, I could do this. And automatically the software is going to filter out any item whose size does not start with LAR. Not going to do that right now, but that is certainly available, and it's available for every department. However that department is broken down, in this case books just from to title, magazines we have a title and a month in this case. However you have told us to create the inventory for that department will automatically be reflected in the from to ranges that you get here. Let's go back to by item number for a second, and we'll leave it blank because we're going to report on all the inventory we have here. And take a look at the Options tab. Now the Options tab is optional, and for different reports may have more options than you see right here, but do be aware that you're pretty much always going to see these options on each of the reports. You can choose a specific vendor, either by selecting their number from the drop-down list, or the binoculars button here allows you to look them up by their name as well. And we also have an optional location filter. So if you only wanted to report on items in aisle 5, this would do that. For now, we're just going to ignore these filters, but I do want to make sure you know they're there. Any report can be sent to the screen, to a printer, or exported to a disk file for use with another package like perhaps Excel. Let's go ahead and select Finish, and we're going to run the item list report for every item in our database. So we have some newspapers, we have magazines, we're reporting the description, item number, UPC if there, the quantity on hand, the quantity allocated, which comes from suspended sales, the retail price of the item, and if the item's on sale, what the sale price is. So a very basic list report to show us information about our items. It's a multi-page report, and you go to the next and previous pages using these buttons up here, or you can actually just type a page number to go to directly in here if you choose as well. So here we're looking at our apparel, t-shirts, sweatshirts, various types and sizes. So a very basic report. There's a trick with a lot of these basic reports, though, that it's worth knowing about. And to show you that trick, I'm going to run that same report again, this time just for the apparel department, and leaving the from and to fields blank. And again, we'll get that same look that we just saw, except this time we're only reporting on apparel. The trick that I'm referring to has to do with the ability to have the software do some subtotaling for you. So if we looked at the end of the report, we could see that we're doing totals for the quantity on hand and the quantity allocated. Suppose I wanted to get some subtotals for those quantities, not for the department as a whole, but for example, by the type of apparel. Well, here's our trick. We'll go back here, and by the way, you'll see the software remembers whatever selection you had put in previously, so you can run multiple reports without having to retype things in. And my trick here is to put something in the from and to type field. Now, I actually want to report on everything, so I'm going to just put in an A here for the start and ZZZ for the end. So this will, in fact, report on exactly the same set of items as we reported on last time. However, the fact that we put something in the from and to type fields is an indication to the software to subtotal based on those types. So we'll report on the caps, and now we get down to the socks here, and then sweatshirts, and there's quite a few more sweatshirts. So if we go to the next page, here's our total for sweatshirts and t-shirts, etc. So you can do this for more than one field at a time if you like. So we could put something in the description as well. It doesn't make sense to put anything in the last index there because by definition there's only one item that's going to show up per that breakdown. Okay, so there's the item list report, and there is our trick for getting the software to do whatever kind of totaling it normally does. You can also get it to do subtotaling within a department by putting something in the from and to fields of a particular index. Location, I did say these were basic reports to begin with, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on them. So the location report, description, item number, UPC, location, how many you have on hand. Value report's a little bit more substantial. Let's go ahead and just run it to begin with. and we're going to get every item that we have in inventory with the quantity on hand, current cost, the average cost, and it's the average cost that we use for figuring out what the value of what you've got in stock is. There's the retail price, and there is the extended average cost. So in other words, the on-hand times the average, that's the value, and extended retail, the on-hand times retail, what you expect to sell it for. Okay, so and if we look at the end of the report, we're going to get a grand total of the quantity on hand, the extended average cost, and the extended retail as well, for your store as a whole or for whatever range of items you are reporting on. Let's take a look at the options tab on the value report, because it does have some additional choices that have not been, that are for this report specifically. One, we can get line item detail or just a quick summary if we wanted to see the value without all of the intermediate steps. Here's the quantity, extended average, and extended retail. One other choice on that screen too has to do with whether we're doing the current or monthly closeout value of our inventory. So current is, as its name implies, the current value of what you've got in stock as of this instant. But our software also takes a snapshot at each monthly closeout you do of the value, the quantity on hand, the average cost at the time of that closeout. So we're automatically storing that up for you. If the monthly closeout option is grayed out, it means you haven't done one. So we're not going to let you select the monthly closeout option if you have nothing to report on. But if you have done one, and it's been quite a while since I have here, but at least I've got something, you'll see that you get a drop-down list, and you can go back as far in time as you like to see what the value of your inventory was as of the end of a particular month. The format of the report is exactly the same. It simply is reporting historical information instead of current. Another basic report for doing physical inventory by hand is our physical inventory report, which gives you the description, item number, UPC location, and a line for you to go ahead and fill in the quantity on hand. So if you don't have the handheld option and are not using a handheld device to count up your inventory for you, which is highly recommended, you can print out this report and go down the aisles and count up your inventory and note it down on the sheet, and then you can use the physical inventory feature to go ahead and update item by item rather than your store as a whole. By the way, this is one report where using that location filter might very well be an interesting idea. I only want to print out a sheet for those items in row 1, for example. Okay, the description report, another simple report that simply gives you the description, item number, UPC, and short description, in this case too, for every item in stock. If, by the way, you have any items with alternate keys, those will show up here as well. So every item can have up to 160 alternate keys as an option in addition to the standard item number in UPC, and those show up on this report as well. It is also possible with items with multiple units of measure to tie those alternate keys specifically to a unit of measure, and that will show up on the report as well. Order status is a report that is essentially trying to preview what you need to order in order to fill up your inventory to the minimum and maximum quantities that you've told us about. Very similar in nature to an automatic purchase order generation type report. The difference between that and order status is that with automatic POs, an item must be linked to a vendor in order for us to actually generate a purchase order. The order status report does not care if the item is linked to a vendor. It's simply showing you if the quantity on hand minus the quantity allocated plus the quantity that's already on order is below your minimum quantity, and if so, we will suggest to you to take it up to the maximum quantity and give you a place to go ahead and write in a number of what you actually want to do if you want to use this as a worksheet for putting together a purchase order manually. The master list is a report that simply dumps out a bunch of stuff. Most of our master lists are like this. We're trying to basically get as much information as we can in a hopefully readable format for you right on the screen here. So description, item number, UPC, on hand, on order, allocated, on, including, by the way, week, month, and year-to-date unit sales, cost of goods sold, markdowns taken, the fields that you see in the performance tab of the inventory record itself show up here. And you'll notice this is now a 47-page report because we're printing so many pages or so many lines per item. Price levels simply puts out the retail price and some general information about the item, and then the retail price and each of the associated price levels for that item. Late fees is something specifically related to rentals, and I think at some point maybe we should do one of these sessions on how Infotouch handles rentals. In this case, this particular gift store doesn't do any rentals, so I'm not going to be able to show you any late fees. But a late fee is a tab in the inventory record that you get for any item in any department that is associated or has been defined to be a rental department. And it allows you to go ahead and put in the late fees that the system will automatically calculate for you when a rental item is returned late. So that's the last of our basic reports. Let's go on now to the analysis reports, which are the next four that we're going to go over. We'll leave the vendor analysis to another class. Inventory movement report is probably one of the most useful reports in the entire system. And it is extremely valuable for analyzing what's moving, what's not, what's making me money, what's taking up shelf space and tying up my capital and not doing any good for me. So again, like all these reports, you get to select how you want to, which items to report on, and the options tab is standard here. But we now have a new tab for ranking basis, and this is really where the movement report gets to do its thing. So we can look at our top rated items or our bottom. So I want to know what's selling a lot, what's not. How many items are we going to report on? And we can select either an absolute number or a percentage. So at the default 100%, we're going to report on every single item, including items, by the way, that have no sales in the range that we're talking about. We'll see this in just a second. It's a way of making sure you get everything on your report. We can summarize at the item level, the department level, the first index, which is the index after the department, or give it a matrix sort of approach. We'll get to these in a second. But let's leave it for now at the default of items. So we're going to, for each of the items that we selected, we're going to report. And now tell us what you want to report on. We can report on week-to-date information, month-to-date, year-to-date, today's sales, or an arbitrary date range. That date range defaults here to year-to-date. We'll go ahead and leave that here. And we also have an option to select what registers we're going to report on. We got a little slider here that lets us select what registers to report on. The default is the first and last registers in your system, and therefore, everything that you've sold. But if you wanted to narrow down and see what's selling on register number 3, you can do that. Okay, so we're going to report on everything since January 1st. We're going to select all of our items and rank them from top to bottom. Okay, how are we ranking those items? What's the basis for the calculation? And here's where we get some interesting choices. So dollar volume, sales, unit volume is what it says. Or we can report on profitability, the cost of goods sold, and we even throw in some additional fields for you to just have on the report if you like. So they're not actually ranked typically by quantity on hand, although you could. But if I wanted to, for example, see what my best-selling items were by sales, and while I'm at it, add a second column, show me what the unit volume is. You know what? And I'd like to see how many I have on hand while I'm at it too. So in the time it took for that screen, for that thing to take, to show on the screen, we've already looked through every sale since January 1st of this year and ranked our items. So our best-selling item is a book called The Client. We sold $311 of it, 29 units. We have 7 of them on hand. So this is a report that really allows you to slice and dice how your inventory is moving, what's making you money. If I looked at the bottom side, I might be able to say I want to see what items are not making me money. Another very useful way to look at what you have on hand and what you maybe don't want to keep on restocking. One last thing I want to point out here, let's leave it back at the dollar volume. I mentioned that we can report on absolute number or percentage. So this would be the top 20, for example. And there's just the top 20 items. Oops, I think I have it at the bottom, don't I? Those are the bottom 20 items, all of which were 0. Yes, see, we still had it at bottom. So now it's top 20 items. And we have some real numbers in there. One little trick here, if you do 100% like we did to begin with, it's going to report on every item. Excuse me for a second here. I didn't switch that back to percentage either, so let's go to 100%, and now we'll get every item. And you can see there's 7 pages worth of it, and if you look towards the back of it, you're going to see that there's lots of zeros in there, and that's pretty typical because these are your worst selling items at the bottom of the report. You can get the software to leave off those 0 items by putting in something like 99. As long as it's not 100%, then the inventory movement report will skip any item whose basis for calculation is 0. So in this case, that had no sales in this date range, rather than throwing them out onto the bottom of the report, we'll just skip those items. And you can see here we have a lot shorter report, even though we're reporting on the top 99% of hundreds and hundreds of items. We're only showing the ones that actually sold in this date range. So the movement report, very, very useful across the board in terms of markets. It's a wonderful report. Another analysis report is our merchandise planning report. And this corresponds to something we later added as an option for our automatic purchase order generation. That is to say, we're going to take a look at our sales over a date range. You tell me what date range. We're going to project a growth rate going forward of, let's say, 5%, or if times are hard, we might put in minus 5%, or whatever we think we're going to be doing in terms of sales in the near future compared to sales over this date range. So what we do at this point is take a look at all the items selected, their sales over this date range. We count them up, we factor in the growth rate, and that's how many we expect to sell. We then take a look at how many you have in stock, and in the report version of this, the merchandise planning, we simply tell you we think you need to order X in order to meet your growth rate targets. So we think we should order 6 Wall Street journals and 25 clients and what have you. These same parameters can be used for automatic purchase order generation and can generate POs for you automatically based on that. In this case, though, the difference again being that merchandise planning does not require the item to be linked to a vendor in order to tell you what we think you need to stay in stock. Quantity sold report takes a look at your sales year to date over the last 6 months, this month last year, and all of last year. And what we're doing is showing you the quantities for each of the selected items that were sold in these periods. So a way of looking at what's been selling and also at the end the quantity on hand. A variation of this report is let's go down one here to monthly unit sales, and that actually gives you 14-month snapshot month by month with the quantity on hand of how many of each of these items selected sold. Also gives you a total over the last 14 months so that you can compare that to what you've got on hand. By the way, that 14-month thing winds up showing up in the purchase order side as well. We added the feature that essentially uses this report, or the logic for this report, to allow you to get a 14-month snapshot of sales by items that are supplied by your vendors while you're in the middle of a purchase order. So you can basically see this report right on the PO screen with a couple of touches of a button. All right, so that's the last of our 4 analysis reports. Again, I mentioned that the vendor analysis will leave to another day. And we're on to our special features reports, which are just basically reporting, as you might guess, items with special features. So if we take a look at any item, we have a special features tab. And so if any of these things is checked, we typically have a report that goes along with it. So, parts explosion. I want a report that shows me all the items in the system that have parts explosion and show me what the components for that item are. In this case, we have a few, and it comes out right away showing you both the quantity, item number, description of the components of our kits and any other parts exploded type items you have set up in the system. Substitutions. If you're out of Marlboros, maybe you want to just suggest a cigarette. The substitutions can be easily looked up in the register when you're out of an item. And although we only have one here for the Marlboro, you can have up to about 200 substitutions for every single item. Next special feature, and we've got 3 different reports for it, has to do with serialized inventory. And serialized inventory can be both sold and rented. So let's start with our basic serialized item report. And for every item that has serials, we'll show you the quantity on hand, the retail cost or retail price, and then each serial number with an optional description that you can put in, the date it was received into stock, and if it was sold, the date it was sold. With serialized inventory, you cannot sell an item unless you have a serial record that is available still to sell. And we have a total quantity there at the bottom, a couple other serialized items that apparently have no records in there as they're just listed as test items. We can also take a look at the value associated with their serialized items, as well as how long those items have been in stock. And I did mention that this data has been kicking around for quite a while, so we have very long-lived inventory still in stock from more than 10 years ago, apparently. That's a pretty good definition of slow mover there. And we'll show you both the cost of the items, and bear in mind, with serialized inventory, we're not talking about average cost anymore. We're talking about the specific cost associated with that individual serial record. And although you'll see that these are mostly at the same cost, as costs change, the actual serial record itself does get that cost updated in its record. So we know exactly how much you paid for it and how much you made when you sell it. Finally, another rental report associated with serialized inventory allows you to take a look at items that are overdue as of a date that you specify. So defaults to today, but you can say, you know, I wanted to look at as of next week or what have you, what things I have rented out to customers. And when you rent, you really want to rent serialized inventory, so we're tracking that specific DVD or whatever it might be to that customer, and we know how long they've had it out for, when it's due back, and if they return it late, therefore, how much late fees to charge them. Next special feature, we have got a couple of reports, and that's our units of measure feature. So I buy my beer by the case, and I sell those cases, but I also sell six-packs and singles out of those cases. The units of measure report allows me to take a look at how those are defined. So in this case, we have a couple of tobacco items that are stocked by the carton, sold by the pack. In the case of Camel here, we sell it by the pack and the each. Rather unusual, but a good example, I suppose. And we'll show you things like how many packs are in a carton, how many eaches are in a carton, how many we have on hand in that unit. So the stocking unit is what's updated in the inventory record. So at this point in time, we have 8.7 Camel cartons in there, and that corresponds to so many packs and so many eaches. And then we'll also show you the price, both retail and price levels for each of your units of measure. The units of measure sales report's actually the only place in the system where you can get analysis by the unit of measure of how things are selling. So you pick a from to date range, and for each item with units of measure, we'll look through the sales during that time and tell you how many you sold. So in this case, we sold 1 pack of Marlboros and 1 pack of Camels. Not doing too well for almost 4 months or so of sales, but it is what it is. But in any case, this is very helpful if you're looking to see, for example, whether it makes sense to break apart your beers into singles and let people buy individuals. You'll be able to tell how many of those individual items are sold or singles by the unit of measure sales report. We also have a report that shows quantity unit pricing. Let's take a quick look again at the inventory record. Show you what I'm talking about here. So in our discount price levels tab, we have several choices for quantity price breaks, and as long as it's not none, it's going to show up in that report. Threshold pricing, buy 2, get 1 free, buy get 3, get 1 for 50% off, buy any 12 bottles of wine and get a 10% discount. All of those are threshold kinds of discounts. In addition, we have quantity unit pricing, where you can define a table of prices based on the quantity sold. So up to 10, we'll sell it for $2, and above 10, we're going to sell it for $1.50. So this is not treated as a discount, by the way. This is treated as the actual price, the normal price you sell it for when you get above certain quantities. And you can go up to 10 levels or so in terms of your tables. You don't have to have just 2 like we have here. And back to our report, and it just spits out basically the kinds of discounting that you've set up, whether it's quantity unit pricing or threshold discounting. Okay, that is the last of our special features, and so we're going to say goodbye at this point, and on our next round we're going to go into the very important audit trail reports, as well as the ever popular label reports, and in particular barcode labels, of course, a very important feature. So we'll do that in the next session. In the meantime, thank you so much for attending, and we'll see you at the next Infotouch University Online.